Thank you. Just a quick point to Mr. Denton. To begin, you were indeed a national CRTC commissioner. I agree with you that you can't impose a legacy broadcasting regulatory system on the internet. That's not the issue. Let's say this legislation goes ahead. Is the CRTC even capable of this?
Is the Inquisition capable of being an inquisitorial agency? Is the CRTC capable? It'll certainly try a lot, but the more. I'm sorry. The idea is risible. The CRTC is composed. The CRTC is composed of, at the bottom, ordinary, reasonable human beings trying to do a good job in the light of a statute which is enormous and which carries with it highly intrusive powers. And they are being set to regulate the terms and conditions under which people shall communicate across the internet for most of the purposes which we use the internet. It is not humanly possible, even if the CRTC were composed of double doctorates in communication, law, and philosophy, for them to do the job that is being called upon for them to do. And the staff themselves are not capable. And this is not because they're dumb or bad or misled. It's because they're human beings. And there is no sufficiently enlightened body of people able to carry out the delicate and subtle tasks that are required. That is my belief. And I've been there. And all I can say is we're just human, and there is plenty of times we made significant mistakes. And you don't want to be making significant mistakes when it comes to the range of human speech and freedom of speech across any communication medium.
Thank you,
That's what I want to say.
Thank you. My next question is for Matt Hatfield, if we could. I actually spoke less than 24 hours ago to a young person who has a very successful site online dealing with finance and other related issues. And that person has already made the decision, even though this legislation is not passed, to upload outside of Canada for these precise reasons that Mr. Lawford and others have raised. Is that your sphere in the world that you operate in and the kind of content producers that you're in contact with?
It's definitely something that some producers are going to be looking at doing. I mean, I think it really speaks to the impoverished vision this bill has of what the market for Canadian cultural content is. This vision that, only people within Canada could possibly be interested in what we're doing, and we have to fight so hard to preserve that little bubble. There are many, many Canadian creators making amazing content for a global market, and many of them actually their market is primarily global. And one of our concerns, particularly for Francophone creators, is that for those creators, the majority of their market may be global. And if another country did a similar thing if France did a similar thing within their market, they could actually lose far more than they would gain, lose a huge portion of their audience if cultural preferencing was happening in larger countries. We're a small player. We're a small, successful player for cultural content in the global market. And we should know ourselves that way and celebrate that. And I so wish we were here discussing a bill that actually recognized the success of Canadian cultural content on the internet and was looking at reinforcing that, not this sort of fear-based, let's batten down the hatches view.
The CRTC chairman who came before this committee a while ago and was asked the question by Senator Wallen whether Bill C11 was not regulating user content indirectly by compelling the platforms to do it. To that specific question, the commissioner responded that you are right, quote unquote. What do the witnesses, and anyone is free to answer this, see as likely the outcome of this? And how do you see user creators ultimately responding to this in their everyday activities, if you can give us specific examples?
Well, I'll speak from the experience as the CRTC commissioner at the time we dealt with whether the internet ought to be broadcasting back in 2009. Essentially, as the bureaucracy seeks to fill up the last cubic inch of its regulatory authority with regulation. And the tendency over time is for regulation to get more minute, more comprehensive, more exhaustive, and more thorough. So if the possibility can be foreseen now that the internet will be regulated as to content, you may be certain that it already regulates as to speakers, who shall speak under what conditions, and it externalizes some of the censorship to the Broadcasting Standards Council, but it still regulates content. And we can imagine a future quite easily where this regulation of content is more specific to individuals, more specific to what people might want to say, and more exhaustive and comprehensive than it is now. Over to you, someone else.
If I may
jump in.
Okay,
Oh,
Len, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. If I were a producer of a digital-first creator of user-generated content, looking at this legislation, I would be looking at choosing to upload my content from outside Canada. I would be looking at contemplating ways in which to avoid the kind of regulation that we're talking about. And as was said before, I mean, the notion that user-generated content is excluded is overtaken by all of the exceptions to the exclusion. Essentially, if you make any money, either directly or indirectly, from your user-generated content through any social medium, you are potentially regulated under this act. So, if you are a Lily Singh or one of the many Québécois or Québécoises artists creating for social media, you might be looking at finding a way to make sure that your stuff is uploaded from outside Canada. That's one thing. And that is a significant impact on the future creativity of this country. This piece of legislation really is intended to favor incumbent broadcasters and those traditional independent producers who supply subsidized content to them. It really was not conceived with the creators, digital first creators, who are generating in the thousands, generating revenues and audiences worldwide outside the framework of the Canadian content subsidized supply management system. Over to someone else.
Mr. Lawford, you want to
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll say that this is a correct answer for Senator Wallen, and in our view, it's gaslighting users to say, you're not regulated, but your programs are. It's like saying to a guitarist, well, you're not regulated, but you can't use your guitar. So what can we do about that? My concern is if it's left in, there will be proceedings, will take a number of years at CRTC, but they may have regulations which get into things like what's appropriate speech. They may get into things like how successful a station is, or whether there's some sort of political bent that is not in favor at that time. It's possible, but we will have to, in the meantime, recommend to users of YouTube that they self-censor, and I think they will do it even without our recommendation. So that would be my concern.
This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.